Hello! Luke Header, and today, for another painting and lore video, we are looking at Captain/Lieutenant Tidus. Titus was recruited in his youth for the Ultramarines chapter, and he quickly rose through the ranks of the Ultramarines while serving in the second company. And early in his career, Titus befriended fellow Ultramarine veteran Sergeant Sidonus. At some point in Titus' service, he was part of the Ultramarine squad who engaged a Chaos Sorcerer, a corrupted Psyker corrupted by the ruinous powers. Titus' whole squad was killed by the Sorcerer's warp-infused attacks, but Titus somehow survived direct blasts of warp energy despite suffering grievous wounds during the course of the battle and single-handedly killed the Sorcerer. Much to the surprise of the chapter's apothecaries, Titus survived his injuries and made a full recovery. Many within the chapter questioned how he survived, insinuating that he may have been touched by the corruption of chaos. Titus himself had no explanation for his seeming invincibility to the direct touch of the warp. Sometime later, the Ultramarine Second Company deployed to the world of Beta Arcturus to defend the planet against an invading force of craft world Eldar from the Bieltan, where the company's captain, Trajan, slew the Eldari autarch. Titus led Trajan's command squad against the elite aspect warrior's bodyguard of the Zenus general, and accounted for the deaths of 3 of the lethal sword fighters, brutally carving through the wraithborn armor with his chain swords. The aliens were defeated, but in spite, they captured one of Titus' battle brothers as they withdrew, a young warrior named Leandros. This prompted Trajan to lead a combat squad to recover Leandros, ordering Titus to secure the battlefield and await his return. The deceptive Eldari, however, had lured Trajan into an ambush, revealing hidden forces not yet committed to the battle. The vengeful Eldari surrounded Trajan and cruelly cut him down. Titus led the counterattack that recovered Trajan's body and assumed command of the strike force that went on to drive the alien suppressors from Beta Arcturus for good. Titus' brevet captaincy over the Second Company was a state of affairs that Chapter Master Marnius Calgar was to make permanent, granting Titus command of the company after they bore Trajan's body back to Macragge, to be interred within a grand sepulchre within the fortress of Hera. Titus went on to lead the Second Company to victory after victory against the mutant and alien and the heretic. Many senior Ultramarines, such as First Captain Severus Agman and the Chapter Master himself, regarded Titus as a model of the humility expected of their chapter, while also being exemplary warrior and strategist. 10 standard years after taking command of the Second Company, Captain Titus led the Ultramarine Strike Force to relieve the forged world of Graia, which had been invaded by a 1 million strong force of orcs, led by the orc war boss Grimskull. The assault was a part of an intricate plan unleashed by the Chaos Sorcerer Nimroth, the Chaos Lord of a warband of Chaos Space Marines known as the Chosen of Nimroth, to get his hands on an experimental power source of the world that would allow him to ascend to become a demon prince. Accompanied by 2 members of his command squad, Sergeant Sidonus and battle brother Leandros, Titus joined with the Astromilitarium's 203rd Cadian Shock Troops Regiment and its only surviving officer, Second Lieutenant Mira, to eventually kill Grimskull and halt the Wog. Unfortunately, the Ordo-Xenos Inquisitor Drogon, whom Titus and his Astartes relied on for assistance in retaking the world, was actually an undead pawn of Nimroth, who used a specifically designed weapon called the Psychic Scourge, powered by experimental power source. Nimroth wanted to open a portal into the warp. This allowed the Chaos Sorcerer, a horde of Chaos Demons, and Chaos Space Marines to come to Graia. Curiously, however, Titus once more displayed an unknowing immunity to the Sorcerer's psychic powers, which immediately raised the suspicions of highly orthodox and Puritan Leandros to his commander's possible corruption. Following the death of his old friend Sidonus on Nimroth's hands, Titus hunted down the foul chaos sorcerer and slew him just as he was in the throes of ascent to demonhood, banishing his dark soul to the warp for punishment by his dark gods. Despite his valiant efforts to liberate Graia, Captain Titus was sequestered by the Inquisitor Thrax and his retinue to the Black Templar Space Marines on suspicion of heresy after Brother Leandros reported his captain's display of uncommon resistance to corruption and warp power. Captain Titus was taken away for interrogation by Inquisitor Thrax, whereupon he disappeared from the chapter annals for a time. Cato Sicarius, who had felt that he had been overlooked for command following the First Tyrannic War, replaced Titus as captain of the Second Company. As it turns out, Inquisitor Thrax held an extreme grudge against Asgardes, seeing them as a liability to the Imperium, and never quite trusting them, especially after the event of the Badabab War, an uprising instigated by the renegade Astral Claws chapter, early in the 10th century. Titus was imprisoned by the Inquisition for over a standard century, continuously tortured and psychologically interrogated by Thrax in an attempt to find the truth of Titus' supernatural resistance to warp energies. And even though no sign of chaos and corruption was ever discerned, the Inquisition refused to relinquish his captive. After a standard century of captivity by the Inquisition, Inquisitor Thrax led an operation against the traitorous Grey Slayers chapter, who had become corrupted by the insidious machinations of the Dark Lords, leading a large retinue of Grey Knights upon the corrupted chapter's homeworld. They began to purge the heretic Astartes in earnest. However, during the conflict, Thrax was possessed by a demon, and in turn was killed by his retinue of Grey Knights. In the wake of Thrax's death, forces drawn from the Red Hunters chapter was dispatched to investigate and secure the Inquisitor's holdings in a remote inquisitional watch station far to the galactic south. A Red Hunters kill team discovered almost a score of Space Marine interrogation subjects locked in stasis cells, preserved for the passage of time. Titus' story could have come to an end there, and had the Inquisitor responsible for overseeing the seizure of Thrax's materials felt inclined to conceal the shame of her fellow Inquisitor. Instead, Titus and several other warriors of various chapters who had attached Thrax's attention were conveyed to the Death Watch Fortress of Watch Keep to be evaluated. After being found free of chaos taint or disloyalty, Titus would eventually enter the service of Watch Keep as a Death Watch Black Shield, his former identity unknown to those he fought alongside. Having received no word from his brethren since his incarceration, he came to believe that he was somehow brought a shame upon his name and that of his beloved Ultramarines. He then determined that he was not worthy to bear the chapter's name. Overcome with shock and grief at his discommendation, Titus had all of his former chapter's heraldry purged from his battle plate and assumed a self-imposed exile as an outcast Black Shield. At this point in time, unbeknownst to Titus, the Ultramarines' Primarch, Rubute Gilliman, had been resurrected on Macragge during the Ultramarine campaign of the 13th Black Crusade, and now, once again, served as Lord Commander of the Imperium and Imperial Regent. Titus, now known as Nolus, deployed as part of the Death Watch's Kill Team Kazarin, was sent on a mission to Residuous System. Titus and his squad were tasked with reinforcing the Astral Militarium force of the 8th Gadian based there on the jungle ward of Kadaku, who were already weakened by the toll taken by the Dominus Crusade. The kill team's mission involved firing a virus bomb into the stratosphere using a local orbital launcher at the main swarm of the Tyranids in hope of killing enough of the bioforms before they adapted to the pathogen to give the Astra Militarum a chance at eradicating the rest of the swarm. The kill team's gunship was brought down by swarming flocks of winged Tyranid bioforms, forcing the warriors to engage with the insectoid aliens on the planet's surface as they struggled to get the virus bomb to the launcher. During this mission, Titus was gravely wounded by monstrous Tyranid carnifex, after he had fought off the swarm after swarm of lesser bioforms. As life bled from his torn body, his fellow Deathwatch battle brothers, having all been slain before him, he prepared to command his soul to the Emperor. It was then that Titus was reunited with the warriors of Ultramar as Ultramarine Strike Force arrived to relieve the Deathwatch on Kadaku. Chief Librarian Tigurius of the Ultramarines detected the soul sign of the warrior once known as Titus in the local Immaterium. as the strike craft traversed the warp. Even as the Tyranid's shadow in the warp began to cloud Tigurius' watch sight like cataracts, the chief librarian recognized he who had once been the captain of the Ultramarine Second Company. Titus' wounds were grave, and it was decreed that he would undergo the Calgarian rites, the Ultramarine name for the Rubicon Primaris, in order to have a chance of surviving. Titus was still the procedures necessary to become a primary Space Marine. As stoic as he had endured any Inquisitor Thrax's interrogation, it would remain strong that he had ever been when he awoke. He was surprised to find himself honored with the rank of lieutenant under the command of Captain Severus Archon of the Second Company, a warrior who had only recently left the Scout Marine Reserve when Titus was taken from the Ultramarines almost a standard century before. Once more, Titus resolved to do as was bid to him by his chapter and serve under a warrior who held the titles he had once held. But that covers the story from his early life, the events of Space Marine 1, and the intro to Space Marine 2. For the continued lore of Captain/Lieutenant Tidus, please play Space Marine 2. It's really good. Since it's still such a newer game, I won't go into the events of Space Marine 2, but it's really good. After all that, this is Luke Ketter, and if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Just keep painting.